Mode.
Good morning and welcome to our webinar this morning, How to Get There and What to Expect at Closing. I'm Sherry Davidson, President Davidson Realty in St. Augustine, Florida. We're located in the World Golf Village. And our guest this morning is Holly Harvey, who is the closing manager at the law offices of Curtis & Associates, PA. Holly handles many of our closings here at Davidson Realty and will take us through the closing process this morning. Holly, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Thank you, Sherry. Yes, my name is Holly Harvey. I am with the law offices of Curtis & Associates, and I work with real estate agents and clients to close properties, to get them to the point where the transaction is completed. I have been doing this for about 7 years. I've worked with several different title companies and attorneys in the area. And prior to that, I was with AT&T for 32 years in their consulting organization. Today, I want to talk a little bit with you about the steps in the closing process. There are really a lot of challenges these days in real estate. And if you haven't purchased or sold a home in the last 3 years, things have changed a little bit. And so we have to be much more aware of the steps in the process and how long it's going to take and the things that each of the parties need to do to make sure that the closing occurs on time and that everything is covered the way it should be. Just to briefly walk you through the basic steps in the closing process. First is the real estate agent completes the contract and they send that on to the title company to do the title search and produce a title commitment. And then through the process there are follow-ups for completion of inspections and appraisals, the termite inspection, a survey, and any other of the requirements that need to be done to make sure that the house is transferred in accordance with the contract as it's stated. Then through the closing process, you have to clear out any exceptions and address any requirements, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in detail. Make sure that all of the contractual items are addressed, and prepare and review the settlement statement, and the buyer and the seller sign the documents, and then the funds are dispersed and the documents are recorded. So at a real high level, that's what needs to happen. But there's a lot involved in each of those steps, and we'll talk in detail about each one of those. The first thing is the contract. At the point in time when the title agent receives the contract, they should be in contact with both the seller and the buyer to determine specific things. For example, make sure we have everyone's name spelled correctly. We have a forwarding address for the seller. If there are any specific time constraints as far as the closing, or if people are going to be traveling and if we have to make special arrangements to get them copies of documents. Those are things that we like to talk about right up front to make sure that we have a good communication going with everyone and that you feel comfortable with the closing agent, because the closing agent is the person who's going to be helping you as well as your real estate agent to get through this process. Once we have received the contract, we review it to make sure of any things that we need to follow up on. In the meantime, the buyer and the seller both have some things that they need to be working with their real estate agent on to make sure get completed. From the title agent's perspective, we do the title commit. We do a title commitment to you. From this, we would verify the spelling of names and how you want to hold the title. We find out who your lender is and the loan amount, and if there are any liens or concerns, that all would come up on the title commitment. make sure copies of the invoices get to the title company. If there's anything that needs to be collected on the settlement statement, the title company is the one who's going to put it on there for you, and those need to be, make sure that those get to the title company in a timely manner. The settlement statement. The settlement statement is a key component of any closing. The settlement statement and the note are the most important things that the buyer is going to be looking at. For the seller, it's the settlement statement and the deed. For the buyer, on the settlement statement, you are going to be looking for the fees that were charged to you by your lender and any of the closing costs. We should be comparing what the contract says to the settlement statement to make sure that the fees are applied accordingly. One of the exceptions that might occur between what the contract fees are designed and what actually occurs on the settlement statement would happen when there is a short sale and the short sale lender is the one who's paying the fees or assuming responsibility or deducting those fees from their payoff. So they will say that sometimes if there are certain fees that they will not pick up. Those things would include, like if a buyer has requested that the seller pay them a credit for some of their closing costs. The short sale lender may say no, that they won't be able to do that, and unless the seller is financially able to pay it out of their pocket, then that would be something that we would have to remove from the settlement statement. But again, that's all a discussion with everyone prior to that actually appearing on the settlement statement. From the seller side, they need to, again, that's usually where the real estate agent fees appear. They take care of usually the title insurance and recording of the deed, the fees associated with that. Also on the settlement statement are any taxes and homeowners dues and any prorations associated with that. We're getting toward the end of the year, so and we haven't gotten our tax bills yet. So on the settlement statement, there should be a large proration from the seller to the buyer to cover those fees, and those are based on an estimate based on the prior year's taxes, and with or we actually go through the appraiser's office, and there's a interactive way to, especially here in St. Johns County where the millage rate has just increased, and that'll be reflected on the November tax bills that will be coming out. We actually look at that to get a better estimate of what that credit should be. Also, if there's homeowners dues, we have to make sure that those are current and paid up to date, and that if they've been paid in advance by the seller, that there is a credit back to him for anything that they have paid beyond the closing date. Anyway, the settlement statement is a key component. We try to get that out at least a couple days in advance. That's not always how it works, depending on how late everything gets pushed out, depending on when the lender can get us documents, and we can get everything pulled together in order to get it out to everyone. Email is a great way to do this if we can get it out to people so they at least have a chance to review it in advance. But remember, if you don't have a chance to review it until you get to the settlement table, don't let that stop you from stopping everything. You should be comfortable with that settlement statement and the fees that are on there before you sign that document. And if it takes longer at the closing table, then that's okay. That's what the process is about. You need to understand the documents that you're signing before you sign them. And that actually brings us to the closing table. That's for the buyer. If you have a mortgage, you're going to have about 100 to 150 pages to sign. Key, again, is the settlement statement. You have the note, and the note, it's really important that you go through the note and make sure that it's the right interest rate that you agree to with the lender, that it's the right loan amount. You want to confirm that your principal and interest payment each month are what you expected it to be. It should say on the note, and you want to confirm that when your payment is due and when it's considered delinquent, and if there is a late fee and what that late fee assessment is. Also, if you have the right to prepay on your note. So those are all things that should be in the note and that you should make sure that you understand before you sign it. The mortgage is usually and I say usually because there's always exceptions to everything, but many of the mortgages that I do are Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac mortgages. They're a standard mortgage. They're the same for everybody. There's some fill-in blanks, and that's just the name and address and the legal description. So basically it's a standard one. If a lot of people have signed these before, so they're comfortable doing that. If you're at the closing table and you haven't had a chance to review the documents in advance, then take the time that you need to make sure that you understand what it is you're signing. People have asked me if they can get the documents in advance. Depending on how soon I have them, I can send those on to you. You can email them to someone. You could come to my office and sit down and take a look at the documents ahead of time if you want to. You know, you're the one who's signing your name to those, so you have every right and should demand anything that you're to make sure that you're comfortable with what's going on, and that it's the way it should be according to your understanding. At the closing table, that's when we do the final review, the signature on the documents. All the funds should be there at that time with a wire from the lender, and any check or wire from the buyer as far as their proceeds. If the seller is bringing any money to the closing, all of that needs to be, and at that point we also get the escrow the escrow payment that was made up front when the contract was accepted. All of that comes in, and then on that day of closing. And so once everything's all signed, all the funds are in, the keys are then transferred to the buyer, and the closing is complete. After the closing, as the title agent, I make sure that the deed and the mortgage get recorded, and that the title insurance policy is mailed to the buyers. There is in this process, if there are any specific requirements on the title commitment as far as liens that need to be done, payoffs to any existing mortgage from the seller, all of those things are the responsibility of the title company to work with the seller to get taken care of. So all of that is done in that post-closing process.